The Penguins dropped their most recent preseason game to the Detroit Red Wings 2-1 last night. Hunter and I are going to talk about that and more on this edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Back, Penguins fans, to another edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am one of your hosts, Patrick Damp, joined as always by the esteemed Hunter Hodes. We thank you for making this your first listen or watch of the day. You can follow the show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. You can follow me on Twitter at Synonym for Wet, and you can follow Hunter on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more right now. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. So, Hunter, we're talking about a game that you were in attendance for last night when the Penguins dropped their most recent preseason game to the Detroit Red Wings 2-1. And you saw it firsthand, so let's hear them thoughts. What were you seeing there in good old PPG Paints Arena?
First off, before we get into that, the new scoreboard is absolutely massive. If you go to a game this year, that thing just stares at you. It is absolutely massive. It honestly reminds me of like a little bit of a mini version of the one at the Dallas Cowboys Stadium. That thing is absolutely huge. It's a very mini version of that, but it's still huge. And yes, going to games alone, it's pretty fun. You all should try it sometime. But overall, the first player that stood out to me, Radim Zohorna, I think there is a problem if he does not make this team. I think he has played his way onto this team after Wednesday night's performance. He single-handedly killed a penalty by himself. Well, Alex Nedeljkovic also helped, and I'll get to him in just a second. But outside of the goalie, Zohorna killed a penalty by himself. That long reach is such an asset that the Penguins are going to have to put him out there, I think, quite often this season if he does make the team, and I think he definitely should. He also was pinning the Red Wings deep in their own zone during the penalty kill there, and he just does all the little things you want a bottom six player to do. He's just so strong with the puck on his stick. I loved watching him last night. I kept my eye on him throughout. It was funny. I thought he scored the opening goal for the Penguins, and I was like, well, no, that's Xavier because he had that beautiful backhand roof job. This is why I need to bring my glasses to PPG Paints Arena. But just overall, loved his performance. He's going to be a big asset on the PK. He'll be a big asset both offensively and defensively for the Penguins this year. In my opinion, there is no way he doesn't make the team next week. He's been that good. I hope he does play in the final preseason game on Friday and continues to show everyone why he should be on the team. But in my opinion, I think he should have wrapped this up on Wednesday. I think he's done enough to make the team.
There's no denying that he has probably been the biggest star of this training camp and preseason so far. Just everything he's done has been essentially a net positive. I don't know if you can quite say he's had a perfect training camp, but he's had about the closest thing you can have to it. And it's been a sight to behold because I've said it on the show before, and it's been kind of the overall talking point regarding him in this training camp is that the coaching staff really had some pause when he got waived and was lost last year. Yep. And I think between that kind of confidence from the coaching staff, as well as just being given the opportunity, he's done everything he can to seize it. Not to mention, he also has said in interviews this preseason that he was kind of upset that he got waived and left Pittsburgh. He's had nothing but glowing things to say about the organization and how much he loved being here. And he's playing like a guy who doesn't want to go anywhere else.
Right. And I remember when they brought him back, I was like, oh, okay, maybe a warm body for camp. And even heading into camp, I didn't even think he was a main contender to make the team. Well, I'll old takes expose myself there because he has been absolutely awesome. There's just no way you can keep him off this team next weekend. And the small sample sizes that he's shown with the Penguins a couple of seasons ago, he showed why he's good enough to be an NHL player. It's all about just adding everything together so that he can be a consistent NHL player. And I think he has the ability to do that this season.
He's a very good utility player. He
Yes.
is a very good utility player. And in this day and age of hockey, that's what you need to be, especially if you're not a superstar. You have to be somebody that can be an everyday player that plays multiple roles, because there's going to be nights where they need him to kill penalties. There's going to be nights where he may have to fill in on the top six. There's even going to be nights where you're inevitably going to play a team that plays some kind of system or is just having themselves a night where they shut down the big guns and somebody's going to have to score for you to win the game. And while I don't expect him to put up big numbers, he's shown that he has the ability to chip in offensively now and then. And that was something last year that was sorely lacking from this franchise.
We all know what the problem was with the bottom six last year. They couldn't score and they couldn't defend. And we've hit on that way too many times to count this offseason. We don't need to do it again. I know the listeners are probably going to get sick and tired of hearing that from us. But I do think Zohorna brings an offensive ability to the bottom six that is sorely needed this upcoming season, and defensively as well. I think he can be, if he plays there the whole season and plays up to his potential, he could be one of the best players in this bottom six this year, maybe next to Drew O'Connor, but he was very good. Also, Jansen Harkins, I got my first look at him at PPG Paints Arena on Wednesday night. I came away super impressed. He had that really nice, nifty pass to Xavier Ouellet, who had that beautiful backhand roof job past James Reimer. Didn't know he had that in him, by the way, but it was just a really nice pass to Spring Ouellet to go to the goal so he can backhand it past Reimer. I thought he was involved in the play throughout the entire game, both offensively and defensively. He looked more like the player who dominated the AHL this past year than someone who I think has struggled to stay in the NHL throughout his career. To me, based off that game, and I know it's a small sample size, he looks like a player who can contribute in the NHL. I do think the Penguins have something here with him. He also led the team in shot attempts per 60 minutes on Wednesday nights. When he was on the ice, the Penguins had 75% of the shot attempts. That's super good. Expected goals for a little bit lower. I think it was around 45%. Scoring chances about 50. But when you're leading the team in shot attempts per 60 against a Red Wings team that is playing a good chunk of the regulars, that's something to talk about, I think. And I just couldn't take my eyes off him throughout. And these next few days are crucial for him. Remember, you can't just assign him to Wilkes-Barre. If the Penguins feel like he can't be on this team come next week, he has to be placed on waivers. And based on how he played for the Jets during the preseason, scored a couple goals, and how he played for the Penguins in this one, I think he will get claimed by someone, maybe even the Jets, because maybe they'll want to take him back before he would go down to Wilkes-Barre, because obviously if he's not claimed, he would go down to Wilkes-Barre, but I think the Penguins would lose him on waivers. So these next few days are a pretty big deal. You saw him taking line rushes with the regulars on Thursday during practice. They seem to be really intrigued about him, and I am too. Just based off that game alone, made some really nice plays with the puck on his stick. I mentioned that pass, had a couple glorious chances, was responsible in his own zone. I didn't know much about him after he was claimed, but I definitely want to see more of him and hope that he plays on Friday in the preseason finale against the Sabres.
You also can't underestimate the power of spite. The guy got waived by a team he probably thought he was going to get a legitimate shot to make. They put him on waivers. He gets claimed. And now he maybe has that little bit of FU in his system to say, I'm going to make a team and I'm going to make you realize what you lost. The other player that we got to mention again is Alex Nedeljkovic. Just another really strong showing by him last night. And early in the game, Penguins go on the penalty kill, and the Red Wings got 3 or 4 A+ looks, and he was right there. He absolutely robbed Alex DeBrincat twice, and both times they looked like surefire goals. And he was right there to make the save. And man, he said it to us a couple weeks ago. A lot of goalies are better when someone's breathing down their neck. And if this preseason showing by Nedeljkovic is anything, Jari might have somebody breathing down his neck this season.
And that can only mean good things, I think, for Tristan. It will allow him to play better potentially throughout this year. But if there was any doubt about the backup job, there should not be now. Alex Nedeljkovic has won that job over Magnus Hellberg, and you can just kiss that competition goodbye. Nedeljkovic was very good in that game on Wednesday, kept the Penguins in it, only allowed a couple of goals. Maybe you want the first one back from Daniel Sprong, but that's also a rip. I mean, Sprong can rip it from anywhere.
Sprong still has a great shot.
Yes, he does. It was a really nice shot, even though it was from about 45, 50 feet away. But outside of that, made a couple of saves on breakaways, had some really nice saves on the penalty kill. I walked away really impressed with him. And if he can play at that level throughout the season, the Penguins will have definitely upgraded the backup goaltending spot this year compared to the last few with Casey DeSmith. I think he's looked better as camp in the preseason has gone on, and hopefully that means good things for the regular season. I don't want to overreact too much because we've seen how that can happen with the Steelers and other teams around the NHL and such, but I was super impressed with his game. I thought he looked poised in net. His movement was really good. He made some saves from inside that were really impressive. I liked his game for this one.
Agreed. And one last thing we got to mention before we go to break. Penguins made a couple of roster moves today, placing a handful of players on waivers, including Andreas Jansen, Una Koppinen, Alex Nylander, and man, I got to say it, Alex Nylander. I don't so much want to say that he fumbled the bag because, as we talked about at the top, Big Z just really made an absolutely incredible case to be on the roster. But at the same time, I said it on the show before, this was the camp for Alex Nylander to show he could be an NHL regular, and he really didn't. He was fine enough, but he had to stand out, and he didn't.
I thought he got off to a super good start during the opening week or two of camp in the preseason, played a couple of good games early on, but after he had that opportunity on Evgeny Malkin's line, and then last night, he just didn't do enough. I think the word to describe his performance during camp in the preseason was pretty ordinary. He just didn't stand out compared to the likes of a Radim Zohorna, like a Colin White, like an Austin Wagner, heck, even a Vinny Hinostroza, who I think has been pretty ordinary as well. But I think Wednesday night was probably one of his better performances. I thought he set up a couple of chances that James Reimer was just better on, in my opinion. But Nylander, if he's not lost through waivers and he gets sent down to Wilkes-Barre, I do think he will be one of the first call-ups from Wilkes-Barre this season if injuries do hit. I liked his game last year. I thought when he came up, he provided a spark to the Penguins, especially in the bottom six. He even played well next to Evgeny Malkin, but that just didn't translate over to camp and the preseason, which is why you see him on waivers. Nobody should be surprised by that move. I get people are going to be upset, but when you have a camp that is this competitive, some players are going to stand out more than others, and that's what someone like Radim Zohorna has done over Nylander. I don't think he was bad by any stretch. He just didn't do enough compared to Zohorna and a couple other guys. Jansen, I got to say, I'm a little surprised, Pat. I was higher on him than others coming into camp in preseason. I thought he was definitely going to win a job from some of these other guys, but to be frank, his camp in preseason stunk. I don't really think he did much of anything. He did not look like the player that scored 20 goals once upon a time in the NHL and 13 goals in another season. I know he's been banged up at times throughout his career in the league, but he was not good at all during this camp in preseason.
No, and that's the whole deal, is that there's no real surprise here with anybody they've put on waivers today. No. It's everywhere between we didn't notice you were average, and in Andreas Jansen's case, you weren't good. So that's just the way the cookie crumbles for camp sometimes. But we're going to send it to break here. When we come back, we are going to talk about some more additions to the Penguins broadcast announced today. But before we do that, we have to talk about today's sponsor, which is FanDuel. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. So if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time than now to get into the action. The app is incredibly easy to use, and there is a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off this NFL season. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. We're back here on the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Patrick Damp, joined as always by the one and only Hunter Hodes. And as we said right before we got into this segment, Penguins are adding even more to Sportsnet Pittsburgh's broadcast team this year, making the announcement today that Pittsburgh native and former NHLer Matt Bartkowski will be part of the studio crew, as well as a Hall of Famer and Penguin Stanley Cup champion, Bryan Trottier. Couple of pretty solid gets, if you ask me. And there was a little bit of a nugget buried in the release today that I think a lot of people may have overlooked. And that's that even though Dan Potash is going to be mostly in studio hosting, he is still going to have some rinkside reporting duties throughout this season. So asked and received for us Penguins fans.
Everyone that just heard that on the show is probably smiling like a butcher's dog right now. Yes. Love you very much.
Playing, he's throwing it back to the KBL days.
Hell yeah, baby. But that's very good news. I did see that as well. I'm glad that you caught it. So we will still probably have funny moments when Dan Potash is peppering Mike Sullivan and some other players during broadcasts. And heck, maybe Haley Hunter will do that a couple of times as well. But I like both of these moves. I think these moves are good for select fans for this fan base. With Bartkowski, some of the younger fans I think can relate to him a bit more with his analysis. And then for Trottier, obviously, Stanley Cup champion, Penguin legend right there. I think some of the older fans will relate to his analysis as well. There's a really nice, good mix of studio analysts here. Trottier, Bartkowski, Jay Caulfield with his Jays illustration. You got Colby Armstrong. He's going to be doing some things at times when he's not doing the color commentary. Got Mike Rupp's going to be in there at times. Dan Potash, Haley Hunter will be doing her ringside reporting and stuff. This has the makings of a very solid crew. And I really like these two hires.
Yeah, and reading the tea leaves here, this does seem like we're getting very close, whether it's going to remain on television or if it's going to become a direct-to-consumer streaming product. But this does feel like Fenway Sports Group is setting it up to have basically an all Penguins all the time kind of channel, because this is a gigantic broadcasting crew at this point. Like, this isn't just 4 or 5 people who rotate in and out. This is a big team. And the diversity of perspectives, it's a diversity of opinions. It's guys who have older experience in the National Hockey League, guys who have more recent experience in the National Hockey League, people who were stars, people who were role players. You have people who have been television broadcasting people for a long time. So it really does feel like we're building toward a moment where there's going to be a Penguin-centric channel that focuses solely on this team. So I think as hockey fans and Penguins media consumers, we're being set up for a really good product that we're going to have for years to come.
I agree. And if that is the case, I do think you'll see more former Penguins brought on. For example, I think Tyler Kennedy, he's usually really active on social media during games. Could he be added as a studio analyst at some point? What about Max Talbot? What is he up to? A couple legends from the 019. You can bring up other players who have retired a little more recently, but those two are just a couple that came to mind. And you said it best. The diversity of opinions with all of these people, that's going to make for a lot of fun hockey talk. You have some of the newer age ones, like a Matt Bartkowski, like a Colby Armstrong, but you have some of the older generations ones, like a Bryan Trottier, like a Mike Rupp, like a Jay Caulfield. And heck, Caulfield has actually been using analytics at times during his telestrations. I'll say it again. I personally enjoy his telestrations. I think he does a really solid job with them. I know some people don't. No, that's just my opinion. But I really like the team that they are assembling. I've enjoyed Josh Getzoff's calls so far on Sportsnet Pittsburgh. Well, didn't have any on the Monday game goals-wise, but I still thought he called a good game. I heard his goal call for the Zerviolette goal on Wednesday. He just seems to have a really nice feel for the game, just like he did on radio. And then, Colby next to him overall has been a lot of fun. But I'm really liking the new revamp that Fenway Sports Group has done so far. This has the makings, I think, of one of the better lineups across the NHL, in my opinion.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you there. Just come on, guys. Let's get it on stream. Let's get it on stream.
YouTube TV, please. Come on. Let's go. Come on, FSG.
So that's going to do it for this segment. When we come back, we are going to talk about some news that came out that affects the entire league today, but it's going to have some solid implications for our Pittsburgh Penguins. But before we do that, we got to get into our next sponsor, which is Indeed. So let me ask you a question. When you're drafting your fantasy team, have you ever wished you could do the same thing with your business team? Because if you're building a roster to win in the league, you need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Don't spend hours on multiple job sites looking for candidates with the right skills, and when you can do it all with Indeed. So you can find top talent fast with Indeed's suite of powerful hiring tools like Indeed Instant Match, assessments, and virtual interviews. Hate waiting? Indeed's US data shows that over 80% of Indeed employers find quality candidates whose resume on Indeed matches their job description the moment they sponsor a job. One of the things that I enjoy about Indeed is that about 5 years ago, I was searching for a job, and Indeed was right there to help me find the right employer and the right place that I wanted to go. So it's a pretty solid service. Indeed knows when you're growing your own business, you have to make every dollar count. That's why with Indeed, you only pay for quality applications that match your must-have job requirements. Visit Indeed.com/lockedon to start hiring now. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing not available for everyone. Need to hire? You need Indeed. We're back for the final segment of this edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. Thank you, as always, for tuning in wherever you tune in and making this your first listen or watch of the day. I'm Patrick Damp. That is Hunter Hodes. And oh boy, buddy, we got some big news today when it comes to the NHL salary cap. According to Pierre LeBrun and just about every NHL insider there is, the salary cap, it's getting bumped up next year to somewhere between 87 and 88 million, which, man, where the Penguins sit today, this could be huge because right now, 18.8 million in projected cap space this offseason.
With obviously, you have to consider Jake Gensel's potential contract extension in there. And if he gets 8 or 9 million, that bumps that down to about 10 million, somewhere in that range. But they'll still have quite a bit of money to spend next year. That's a potential middle six winger. That's potentially maybe another defenseman if you want to add. Maybe if Alex Nedeljkovic doesn't work out, that's money for a backup goaltender. This team is going to have more money to spend going forward, and that's only going to mean good things, especially with how this team always wants to spend to the cap. Nothing has changed since Fenway Sports Group took over from Mario Lemieux and Ron Burkle. Nothing will change until this team is not contending anymore. And obviously, one of the biggest things, Sidney Crosby's contract situation is up in a couple years. The cap should be up more at that point, you would think. And if we can believe Gary Bettman, and sometimes that's a little much because we all know Gary likes to lie about some things, the cap going up, that's just going to be great, not just for the Penguins, but I think the league overall. You see some of these bumps that the other leagues have gotten, right? The NFL's cap is massive. The NBA just had a massive jump. I'm not asking the NHL salary cap to be at the NFL's level, but if it can get, halfway to where the NBA's is at, that would be nice because I think it would make for more excitement during the offseason. But just, again, from a Penguins perspective, this is going to allow them to add, I think, another quality player or two next year and potentially the year after, especially if they use their cap space wisely. And I think with Kyle Dubas and company at the helm and not having it be Ron Hextall, that should happen.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I'm a keep the salary cap, but add a luxury tax and make it a soft cap and not a hard cap guy, this is still a good thing that it's going up again. And at the end of the day, we have to keep this in mind, right? Crosby, Malkin, Letang, Carlson, they're getting up there. And I say it all the time, Father Time waits for nobody. Eventually, it's going to come for them. Here's the hoping that it doesn't come in the fact that they just fall off a cliff and start to stink. But you have to figure sometime over the next handful of years, their production is going to start dipping. They're going to start becoming less and less elite, becoming great, then to good. Then they're probably going to have to go into retirement. But with the cap going up and the amount of cap space they're about to have available to them, they can go get a really good 20-something scoring winger who's just about to hit free agency. They can move a couple contracts out and swing a big deal. We saw it this summer. He went out and got Erik Karlsson. That didn't seem like something that was even close to on the table. Because I remember when it first got mentioned around the draft, people were like, Eric, they have cap space, but not enough to get Erik Karlsson. And they don't have anything enticing to give up. How are they going to get Erik Karlsson? And they figured it out. The other thing that gives me giant moon-sized saucer eyes is if we go 2 years from now and we trust Cap Friendly's projection, which has the salary cap at $92 million in 25-26, going into that offseason, the Penguins are going to have nearly $47 million in cap space. And if you look down their lineup, everybody worthwhile is still locked up. So for a lot of people who say, oh, this team's window's it's shutting. The cap alone might keep it open because they're going to have a ton of space and everybody worthwhile is locked up and they can go make splashes in the trade market, in the free agent market. And all of a sudden, yeah, you still have Crosby, Malkin, Letang, Karlsson, but then you give them a band of merry men who are just as productive, if not more. And all of a sudden, my God, this era of Penguins hockey still has 4 or 5 years left.
You just got to spend wisely when you have all that cap space. And if the cap does go up to 90, 91, 92 million, hopefully it does. But you're right. They will have a boatload of cap space if that happens. You just got to make sure you're spending it on the right players. I do have faith in Kyle Dubas and company that they would do that. For next year specifically, though, I think the Penguins can continue to take advantage of some of these more cap-strapped teams like they did this offseason. Kyle Dubas talked about that during his opening press conference. That's why they went out and traded for Riley Smith, because he knew that the Vegas Golden Knights, they were up against it. They were trying to keep Ivan Barbashev, which they eventually did. But to do that, they needed to sacrifice a pretty good player, someone who can score 20 to 25 goals. And they got him for pennies on the dollar. They gave up a third-round pick for him. And I think you can see more of that potentially next year, even when the cap is going up, and maybe they can get a player that's even better than Smith at that point. But I'm usually not someone who's like, oh, go out in the free agent market, sign all these 7-year terms that are probably going to end up in buyouts in year 3 or year 4 or something like that. But there could be the case where in a couple of years, they have an ability to sign a player to a 7-year contract, not just a middling player, which again will end in a buyout, but a potential star player if one hits the market at that time. So this is super exciting. It means a whole bunch of things for the Penguins between new trades, new signings, Jake Gensel, Sidney Crosby, other extensions. And this is really good news because we can see the Penguins having more cap space each summer, which they're not accustomed to. Let's say that.
No, the cap alone, like I said, could be the main reason this team's championship window remains open for longer than it probably should. But that is going to do it for us on this edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast.
We do have the lineup, by the way, for tomorrow. If you want to,
do we want to just? I was going to say, do we want to save that for tomorrow?
We can save it for tomorrow. I think. Okay.
Because I was going to say, we'll be back tomorrow with another episode where we will preview the final preseason game against the Buffalo Sabres. We'll talk about the lineup, as Hunter just said, and we'll go through some other roster moves that they're sure to make over the next couple of days. And then, oh boy, we got real hockey coming. So thank you all so much for watching this edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast, and we will talk to you tomorrow.